A date night in small-town Wisconsin should have ended with tired smiles, a drive home, and maybe one last glance at a photo taken under concert lights. The streets were warm, the bars were full, and nothing about that Saturday night suggested it was moving toward disaster. For adults had gone out to eat, drink, and listen to music. One of them would never make it home. The change came fast. A stranger entered the group. He noticed the tattoos on one man's arms and treated them like an offense. What began as awkward bar talk hardened into open contempt. Then came the moment no one could pull back from. A rush toward the door. Raised voices. A burst of motion on the sidewalk. And afterward, almost nothing fits cleanly together. The witnesses disagreed. The grainy camera footage hid as much as it showed. Some saw a punch. Some saw a stool. All of them saw the fall. This is the case of Joshua Davies. On a warm Saturday night in June 2023, downtown Hartland, Wisconsin, was filled with music, alcohol, and the easy mood of early summer. A large outdoor concert was underway at Beer Snob's Ale and Eats, a busy spot just steps from the Bark River. 2 minutes down the street sat Tabby's Lake Country and Wine Bar, a smaller, quieter place with a more polished feel. It should have been the kind of night people forgot by morning. Instead, for minutes outside that wine bar ended a man's life and shattered several others. Joshua Davies and his wife, Jennifer, were out on a date night. They had met up with two friends, Laura Burke and Brian Richardson, and spent the evening between dinner, drinks, and live music. Josh was 39 years old, loud in the best way, full of energy, and known for making any room feel bigger the moment he walked into it. He had been born and raised in the area, worked in landscaping, loved disc golf, and carried himself with the ease of someone who enjoyed people. His tattoos were part of that identity. They covered his arms in designs that meant something to him, pieces of memory and self-expression worn openly and proudly. Jennifer had known that side of him from the beginning. Their love story moved fast. 2 days after they met, Josh proposed. 1 year later they were married. 10 years after that, they were still together, still happy, still choosing each other. Josh was a father to 2 children and a stepfather to Jennifer's son, Jensen. He was the kind of man who hugged hard, laughed loudly, and showed up for the people he cared about. Earlier that same day, he had played disc golf with Brian, spent time with Jennifer, and gone out for what was supposed to be nothing more than a fun summer night. Laura Burke had also spent part of the evening talking with a man she had just met at the concert. His name was Kevin Seymour. He was 64 years old and had come to the event with a friend, though by the time Laura and the others walked over to Tabby's, that friend had stayed behind. Kevin followed Laura to the wine bar, joining a group made up entirely of people who already knew one another. He was a stranger among them, older than the rest, and stepping into a circle that had its own long history and comfort. That alone was not unusual. What happened next was, near the end of the bar, Jennifer introduced herself and Josh. Brian was there beside them, a longtime friend of Josh's dating back to his teen years. Laura drifted between the bar and the table. Kevin stood nearby with his back to the camera. At first, the conversation sounded like aimless bar talk. Then Kevin focused on Josh's tattoos. Instead of making a passing remark and moving on, he leaned into it. He treated the tattoos as a moral offense. He spoke about them as damage to the body God had given him. He made it clear, almost immediately, that he judged Josh for wearing them. Josh laughed. That was his first response. He treated the comments like a joke because the alternative was too strange to absorb. A stranger had just met him and decided to insult him over his arms. For a moment, the tension hid behind laughter, but it did not disappear. Kevin kept pushing. The subject did not drop. The exchange sharpened. Josh fired back with sarcasm, Kevin kept talking, and the mood at the bar shifted from awkward to hostile. Jennifer and Laura were drawn into parts of the conversation. Brian stayed close, watching it happen. Within moments, what should have ended as a rude, forgettable interaction became personal. Josh eventually moved away from the immediate circle and stood farther down near a table. The break should have cooled things off. Instead, Kevin followed the conflict with his words. He spoke about Josh as though he had already taken offense deeper than the situation deserved. The younger man had become, in Kevin's mind, someone to be challenged. The age gap, the crowd, the setting, and the presence of Josh's wife did nothing to slow that impulse. It was no longer a disagreement over tattoos. It had turned into a test of pride. Jennifer tried to redirect the night. The goal became simple. Get outside, leave, and let the whole thing die where it started. Josh and Brian headed out the front door. Laura tried to steer Kevin the opposite way, toward the rear exit. If he had taken that path, he would have drifted back toward the concert and perhaps back to the friend he had come with. The night could still have ended there. But he refused the exit away from trouble. He set down the drink Laura handed him and stayed fixed on Josh. At the front of the bar, Josh called inside to Jennifer, frustrated that Kevin was still being entertained at all. His words pulled the tension tight one last time. Kevin answered. Then he moved. In less than a minute, he was outside. What happened on the sidewalk unfolded so quickly that it left behind a story with broken edges. There were a few witnesses, a low-quality security camera from the neighboring pharmacy, and a body on the concrete. In those final seconds before impact, details split apart. Some remembered a stool in Josh's hands. Some did not. One person believed Kevin had thrown a stool first. Another believed Josh lifted one to defend himself. Some remembered a closed fist. Others saw a forearm or a forceful shove. But the central truth never changed. Kevin rushed toward Josh. Josh went backward. His head struck the concrete with devastating force. Jennifer ran out and saw Kevin move at Josh with momentum. Brian saw Kevin advancing and then saw Josh hit the ground. A musician loading equipment nearby watched the motion from his car and saw the collision end with Josh falling flat back onto the pavement. The pharmacy camera captured shapes through glass and framing walls, enough to show the men converging and enough to show Kevin above Josh for a brief instant before turning and fleeing. It was not a long fight. It was one violent burst. Josh never had the chance to brace properly. His skull hit the sidewalk in a way the human body is not meant to absorb. Within seconds, the evening changed from a confrontation to a medical crisis. Jennifer returned to the bar asking for help. Josh lay on the concrete drifting in and out of consciousness. Kevin paused only briefly before running down the street and out of sight. When officers arrived, they found Josh badly hurt on the pavement outside Davies. He was rushed to Aurora Summit Trauma Center with a traumatic brain injury. For days, then weeks, his family and friends lived in the long suspended time that follows catastrophic injury. Machines took over what his body could no longer do alone. Hope rose and fell from hour to hour. The man who had walked into the wine bar under his own power never woke up again. On July 12, 2023, after 27 days in intensive care, Joshua Davies died from the injuries caused by that fall. His death transformed a late-night bar confrontation into a homicide case. By early morning, Kevin Seymour had not been found at home. He came forward later that afternoon. By then, the physical scene had already become the center of a growing legal battle. Outside the bar stood a cluster of high-top tables and metal stools. Inside the investigation sat a difficult question. Had Kevin punched Josh in the face, or had he merely blocked a stool and sent him off balance? The answer would shape everything that followed. Kevin framed the night as an encounter with drunk, confrontational younger men. He described the talk inside as mutual trash talk and claimed he lost patience only after Josh insulted him again from the doorway. He insisted that when he stepped outside, Josh and Brian had stools raised. In his version, Josh tried to strike him with one and Kevin used an open hand to block or push the stool back. According to that account, Josh fell because he was off balance, drunk, and moving forward with force of his own. That story never fully matched what others saw. Jennifer remembered Kevin charging out and throwing a punch. Brian never saw Josh attack with a stool at all. The musician outside believed Kevin grabbed a stool and threw it aside before reaching Josh and striking him. Laura, still inside, believed Josh had a stool lifted over his head. The camera could not resolve the full truth frame by frame. It showed motion, not certainty. What it did show was Kevin closing distance and Josh going down hard. The clean version Kevin wanted to tell could not erase the fact that he chose pursuit over retreat. Josh's blood alcohol level became a major point in the case. Measured at a minimum of .24, it was extremely high. That level could affect coordination, judgment, balance, and reaction time. Yet intoxication did not explain why Kevin went after him. It did not explain why a man who had been offered a way out refused it. It did not explain why, if he truly feared danger, he kept moving forward instead of turning back. Josh may have been impaired. Kevin was the one who advanced. Everything about the minutes before the fall made the case messy in detail and simple in essence. The argument began with judgment over tattoos. Kevin made the issue personal almost at once. He escalated inside the bar. He ignored attempts to calm him. He rejected the safer exit. He followed the conflict outside. Then he made physical contact that ended with Josh's skull striking concrete. However blurred the last seconds remained, that chain of choice was clear. For the people who loved Josh, the loss was impossible to fit into reason. He had gone out for a normal night with his wife and friends. There had been no feud, no long-running dispute, no dark history waiting to catch up with him. He died because a stranger decided he hated what was on his arms. That randomness made the grief even harder to bear. Josh was not a man known for violence. Friends and family described him as easygoing, affectionate, and full of life. He cared deeply about the people around him. He was a lover, not a fighter. The cruelty of his death lay not only in its violence, but in how pointless it was. The case went to trial in August 2024. In court, Kevin's defense did not deny that he had been rude, angry, and confrontational inside the bar. The defense instead argued that the fatal moment outside was not an intentional attack. It rested on three ideas. First, that Josh had been swinging or preparing to swing a stool. Second, that his severe intoxication made him more vulnerable to losing balance. Third, that the final movement near his feet may have contributed to the fall. In that version, the death was tragic but not murderous, the result of one defensive act colliding with a drunk man's unstable footing. The prosecution focused on the choice Kevin made long before Josh hit the ground. Self-defense has limits, and one of those limits is provocation. A person cannot drive a conflict forward and then claim innocence when violence follows. Kevin had every chance to stop. He could have ignored Josh's final insult. He could have gone out the back with Laura. He could have returned to the concert. He could have turned around at the door. Instead, he pursued the man he had already singled out and insulted. By the time his hand connected with Josh, the encounter had been built through Kevin's own decisions. That logic cut through the conflicting eyewitness accounts. It mattered less whether the force was delivered by fist, forearm, or shove. It mattered less whether the stool was raised, dropped, or never fully used. What mattered was that Kevin was the one closing in, the one carrying the argument forward, the one who refused to disengage. Josh ended up dead because Kevin wanted the confrontation finished on his own terms. The jury agreed. Kevin Seymour was found guilty of felony murder based on aggravated battery with intent to cause bodily harm. The verdict reflected the central finding of the case. This was not an unavoidable accident and not a clean act of self-protection. It was violence born from a petty grievance, a burst of anger over nothing that justified it, and a decision to pursue conflict until somebody hit the ground. At sentencing in September, a fuller picture of Kevin's temper emerged. The killing of Josh Davies had not come from a peaceful life suddenly broken by one impossible night. There were earlier incidents showing the same pattern. In 2015, he lashed out at a 15-year-old at a car wash. In 2022, he threatened a contractor working near his neighbor's property line, telling him he would put him in a hole. These were not identical events, but they revealed something familiar. Kevin could take a brief public interaction and turn it into hostility fast. The state saw that pattern as proof that the danger had not appeared out of nowhere. The sentence was 7 years in prison, followed by 5 years of extended supervision. For Josh's family, no number would ever feel proportionate. A man lost his life after a few minutes of drunken argument outside a wine bar. His children lost their father. Jennifer lost her husband. His parents lost their son. His sister lost her brother. His friends lost the loud, funny, deeply familiar presence they expected to keep for decades. 7 years could punish the act. It could not repair the hole left behind. Kevin expressed remorse in court and asked the family for forgiveness. But remorse comes after the fact, when the concrete is already stained, the hospital stay already endured, and the funeral already planned. By then, every apology lives on the wrong side of the night that mattered. For Josh's family and friends, memory became the place where his story stayed alive. They remembered the way he embraced people, the way he filled a room with noise and warmth, the way he cared about his children, his wife, and the circle around him. They remembered the disc golf games, the tattoos, the jokes, the big personality, and the simple joy he carried into ordinary days. They remembered that one of the last pictures ever taken of him showed him smiling beside Jennifer at the concert earlier that night, before the walk to Davies, before the stranger, before the sidewalk. There was a bitter irony in the reason the encounter began. Josh loved tattoos. He designed some himself and wore them without apology. They marked his body with the memories, choices, and style that felt true to him. The man who attacked him saw those same tattoos and decided they were a reason to condemn him. In the end, the tattoos became part of how Josh was honored. Friends and family wore their own ink proudly as they gathered for justice, carrying forward the thing that had sparked the rage of the man who killed him. Josh had a saying he liked to repeat: "Live and let live." It fit him because he meant it. He was not interested in policing how other people looked, lived, or expressed themselves. He moved through the world with energy instead of bitterness. The violence that took his life was the exact opposite of that spirit. It came from needless judgment, quick anger, and the urge to dominate a stranger over a trivial slight. On June 17, 2023, Joshua Davies left home for a date night with his wife. He spent the evening with friends, laughed through a strange insult, walked out of a wine bar, and met a man who could not let the matter go. 4 minutes later, he was on the ground with a fatal brain injury. 27 days later, he was gone. The story ends where it began, on a summer night in a small Wisconsin village along the Bark River. Music played at one bar. Drinks were poured at another. Friends stood close together. A stranger took offense. A brief confrontation turned into irreversible violence. And a man known for love, loyalty, and life itself never came home.